Good morning. I am Kevin Price. Glad to be with you. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. Got a lot to cover on today's show, and so I think I'm going to get straight to it. Got Jimmy Jingle on the program, and he is going to spend some time. Tell us a little bit about his comedy routine he does. I'm sorry, that's Jimmy Tingle. And glad to have you on the program. You know, we need a lot of humor besides the accidental humor that we get from politicians. And glad to be able to, we're going to get to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Kevin. How is everything down there in Texas?
Doing great. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Jimmy Tingle, and I've been a comic since the early 1980s. And I enjoy it very much. I was very fortunate to find something I enjoyed doing early on in life. And I stuck with it all these years, and I'm still doing it, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly, performing for people, performing all over the country, and theaters, and doing all sorts of different shows. My current show right now is Jimmy Tingle for President, Humor for Humanity, and I'm presently up in New Hampshire. We were up here for the primary last night, or the other day, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, a lot of folks out here, and the people who come to the show really enjoy the show because it's a take on the political scene, and they can identify with it in a humorous way. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, very good. Talk a little bit. Are you familiar with Pat Paulson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How much inspiration was he?
Well, he was he was great. He was great, and people always bring him up when they hear about the show. They're thinking Pat Paulson, but it was fun that what he did, and he was the first one to do it that I know of. And you know, it was a great take on politics, and I think one of his lines, people repeat his lines to me all the time. One of them was, "We will be the decisive party." We will be decisive, sort of, or sometimes, something like that. We'll be decisive. Sometimes. I think that's what his quote was.
Yeah, vintage Pat Paulson. He, by the way, has been on my show back in the 90s, just before he died, in fact, a few times in a show I had back in the 90s called, what was that show called? What was it called? Kevin Price Live. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's back in ancient history. So he was phenomenal. He was an amazing guest and an amazing humorist as well. Talk a little bit about what you've got, what made you move into this space. Although I think comedy, I think politics is funnier now than ever, so I guess there's plenty of material there. But talk a little bit about that.
What got me into the space of comedy?
Yeah, political comedy.
Political comedy. Well, I grew up in Boston. It's a very political area. We've got the history going all the way back to the American Revolution and the Pilgrims before that. And it's always been it's a big melting pot here, so there's a lot of different trends that have developed in this part of the country for over the last 300 years. Then you have the academic influence. You've got the influence of Harvard University and MIT and all the universities up here. So it's always been a very interesting place in terms of ideas. A lot of different ethnic groups, a lot of different ideas. You've got an academic component. You've got a historical component. You've got a very political component with the Kennedys and the heavily Democratic state, although we have a Republican governor here that's doing very well. And it's just an interesting place. I always had an affiliation for politics going back to my early childhood. My uncle was actually involved in politics on the local level in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was the first Italian-American ever elected to the Cambridge City Council. And he was, and so we grew up with sort of a ward politics mentality where election day you go out and hold a sign for Uncle Joe or, knock on doors or get signatures for one of my uncles. So I sort of grew up with that early on in life. And I've always paid attention. Some people like sports. Some people like, car racing or whatever. The track or horse racing. I always just liked politics because I always felt that it had, there were concrete results. When somebody got elected or won an election, it wasn't like winning the Super Bowl, but it was great, but there were results. There was a policy that changed. Something usually changed in the country when that happened. And I always found that very intriguing and always just paid attention to it.
Okay. Tell me right now, so in the presidential campaign, where are you getting which candidate's giving you most of your material?
Well, I saw Donald Trump, man. I got to tell you, after Iowa, he came in second to Ted Cruz in Iowa, and I felt kind of bad for him because he put immigration front and center in his campaign, and then he lost came in second to a Cuban American born in Canada. So I thought that was kind of funny, and he's the funniest by far, the funniest candidate, because he's he's very much a loose cannon. So the other night, what was he saying? I saw him a couple of weeks ago on television say, he said, listen, he's talking to a bunch of supporters. He said, listen, if you elect me as your president, your lives will improve dramatically. Now, I don't know about their lives, but as a comedian, I would say that's definitely true.
He was talking to you, huh?
Well, yeah, I was watching on television, and he was talking to his supporters, yeah, and I was getting a kick out of it. But yeah. He's completely changed the race and changed a lot of things in terms of politics. He's like Uber compared to the taxi cab industry. You know what I mean? He's got his own rules and he's got his own kind of way of doing things, and he's got enough money that he can say what he wants and finance his own campaign. So he's outside of the political establishment, at least the Republican Party. And then you got Bernie Sanders on the other side. And Bernie is, he has completely been underestimated. He just had a big win here in New Hampshire 2 nights ago. And, Hillary came in, and people like Hillary for the most part, and people up here like her. But Bernie was hitting on issues that the other candidates haven't been talking about. And those economic issues, the bread and butter issues that just are resonating, especially with young people, about college tuition and the cost of universities and student loans and wages and the inability to save money and the cost of health care. I mean, all those issues, the cumulative effect of that is that people came out to the polls and it was 2-1 here in New Hampshire for Bernie Sanders. And you would think that somebody with who calls himself a democratic socialist, it would be, almost a disqualification in American politics. But I think people have moved beyond certain labels, and they're looking at their pocketbook and looking at who's going to provide the best opportunity for me in my pocketbook.
Yeah, right. There are also the vast amount of ignorance among American voters when it comes to what socialism is. Meanwhile, the presidents of northern European countries are now asking Bernie Sanders to stop comparing his philosophy to their philosophy because they're actually moving away from socialism, while the United States continues to move to that because socialism fundamentally doesn't work. You shoot the goose that lays the golden egg. Guess what? He's pretty fast. He's going to move somewhere else, which has been the story throughout Europe. But anyway, good material there on Trump. What other candidates have surprised you as far as political fodder, and what does your typical routine look like? And we got about a minute left.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't do so much on the candidates very much. I basically talk about my own. First of all, one of the things I'm trying to do is in my comedy, I try to be positive about some of the positive trends in this country. If you just listen to the candidates, if you just listen to the debates, you would think it was the end of the world, that we're all going out over the cliff. For example, here's some good news. Americans are living longer and healthier lives than ever before. They say 60 years old is the new 40. I love that. 80 is the new 60. I love that. 100 is the new 80. I love that. And the afterlife is the new assisted living. So we have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
And I recently went back to school in my 50s, and I have to tell you, the great thing about going back to school in your 50s, you get the student ID and the senior discount.
All at the same time. You got to love that.
That's right.
Do you get to add those discounts?
Pardon me?
Do you get to add those discounts? 20% here, 20%. That'd be great. You ought to try that. Hey, thanks so much for being with us. How do we get more information about you? And our guest again, Jimmy Tingle.
Yeah. You can find me at jimmytingle.com. You can follow me at Twitter, at Jimmy Tingle on Twitter. And here's something pretty cool. The Pope is actually following me. I actually got a tweet from Pope Francis, okay? The Pope is following me on Twitter. And let me just say this. As a Catholic, that's a lot of pressure.
By the way, I seen you were on the Tonight Show. Under what era? Who was?
I was on there with Johnny Carson, 1988.
Wow. Man, that's legendary. Yeah. Congratulations. Thanks so much for being with us. JimmyTingle.com. Make sure you check him out. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. Continued success.
Thank you. When we come back,
Bye-bye.
More for you. We want to remind you the show continues 24/7 at priceofbusiness.com.
It's so hard to live with the things you do to me.